Turin, Genoa and Milan. Milan is a bustling, competitive city of commerce and industry. Ask a Milanese and he'll tell you that Rome may be the capital, but Milan is where the action is, commercial, financial and artistic. To the west of Milan lies Turin, the Birmingham of Italy, and the giant car factories of FIAT, with their own smelting works and steel rolling mills. Italy is one of Europe's leading vehicle manufacturers, and today every fifth Italian owns his own car. At the end of the Second World War, Italian industry was at a standstill. It took massive inflows of American and foreign capital to reconstruct and retool. With the controls of fascism gone, Italians were free again to develop their unique industrial skills. They had a large pool of unemployed labor ready to work for low wages. And foreign capital helped industry harness new sources of power, steam power from volcanoes, and hydroelectric power from giant dams built high in the Alps. Within a decade, they'd fashioned from the ruins of a costly war one of Europe's most efficient industrial nations. Italy's industrial recovery was one of the economic wonders of the post-war years. But Italy, like many other countries, had to pay a price for its industrial progress. Not all of Italy's business is privately owned. The state competes actively in a host of products ranging from textiles to luxury cars, and has a virtual monopoly of air, sea and rail transportation. From Turin, the freight trains head east to the port of Venice, Italy's ancient and historic city on the Adriatic, or west to Italy's major seaport, Genoa, on the Mediterranean. Columbus sailed from Genoa on one of his voyages to America. Today's freighters and liners sail for ports in almost every country in the world. In their deep holds, they carry the fruits of Italian industry: cars, textiles, glassware, heavy machinery, typewriters and tractors. Italy today is unusually prosperous, but much of that prosperity still remains rooted in the north. Below Naples, in many places, little has changed. This is the Mezzogiorno, or noonday, the pleasant-sounding name Italians give to their southlands. In summer, the burning sun and hot African winds dry the land to dust. In winter, the long rains churn the fields to pools of mud. Where the soil is volcanic around Naples on the mainland and Mount Etna in Sicily, crops grow easily, as they do on the fertile Apulia plains in Italy's heel. But elsewhere, the people of the south today farm a land ruined by their forefathers, or fish coastal waters that often yield less than a bucketful of fish for a day's work. And though rare, the terremoto, or earthquake, remains as a threat to the southern Italian. Small wonder that those who can go north to the promise of a better and an easier life in the cities. Yet once this barren land was rich and fertile. The Greeks settled here 700 years before Christ and made it a center of culture and learning. Dense forests of oak, laurel, myrtle grew in abundance on the hills and mountains. Over the centuries, men chopped down the trees for fuel, timber, and quick cash profits. With no trees to hold the earth, torrents washed the rich soil down into the valley and out into the sea. Sheep and goats feeding on tender new shoots completed the devastation. Today, much of Italy's southland is impenetrable clay or barren rock. Italy's Mezzogiorno is a classic example of what man can do to his land through ignorance and greed. Finally, after centuries of neglect and despair, things are beginning to change in the Mezzogiorno. New housing projects now rise over land that has lain idle for centuries. New schools are bringing better educational opportunities and a new sense of pride and self-respect to the children of the Mezzogiorno. A steel plant at Taranto, a railroad equipment factory at Reggio Calabria, a car assembly plant near Naples, all point to a brighter economic future. But there are serious weaknesses in the program for southern development. Though the government and private industry have invested billions of dollars in the Mezzogiorno, much of this money has had to be spent in the north to pay for machinery and trained personnel, money which the south desperately needs. Many of the biggest public and private investments have gone into refineries, petrochemical plants and nuclear power stations. During construction, these provide employment for local labor, but once completed, these highly automated plants need comparatively few workers. What the southerner urgently needs is permanent, not temporary employment. The building and later the operating of many small consumer goods factories would provide the necessary work and wages for local labor. Today, many in southern Italy pin their hopes on the new autostradas that now run the entire length of the country, from Milan, Turin and Venice in the north, to Naples, Bari and Reggio Calabria in the south, and on to Palermo in Sicily. By making their towns and unpolluted beaches more accessible, the autostradas are beginning to bring them a share of the more than £100 million that tourists spend each year in Italy. The building of new tourist villages and the attraction of new industries catering to tourists, hotels, restaurants, gas stations, are all helping to solve the problem of unemployment in the Mezzogiorno. But much still remains to be done, and the people of the South are giving Italy's government only a limited time to fulfill their many promises. Their ultimatum has been a political one. In recent years, the opposition parties have more than doubled their votes in the Mezzogiorno. For too long now, these people have had little to look forward to but a hard life and a cheap funeral. For them, today is the time for change. The north of Italy contains not only the bulk of the country's industry, but most of its finest farmland as well. Much of this borders the great river Po that flows through the provinces of Lombardy, Emilia-Romagna and Venetia into the great rice fields of its delta on the Adriatic. Unlike the south, the men of the north worked hard over the centuries to keep their land rich and fertile. Complex systems of drainage kept the land free from floods in winter. Irrigation projects provided constant water supplies through the hot summers. Today, with modern equipment and new methods, the farmers of the Po Valley are producing better crops and higher yields than ever before. In agriculture, as in industry, the Italian government plays an active part. To help the landless farmer, some 90 colonization centers now stretch from the Po Valley southwards into Sicily. In these colonization centres, the government provides each farmer with his own house on its own plot of land and teaches him how to get the best results from his plot by combining local knowledge with modern farming techniques. At the end of the year, each farmer receives his share from the sale of the colony's crops. Community life is centred in a village that has its own public buildings, shops, cinema and grain storage depots. Calling a better way of life to many Italians who for centuries have worked the land but never owned it. As in the past, all roads